Welcome back, everybody. It's Bruce with the Epic Experiment Podcast. One more time, we're bringing you a deck tech. Today, we are bringing you Optimus Prime Hero. This was one of the special supplementary commanders from Brothers War. I guess because they thought it would match well with Megatron and Optimus Prime fighting in the same way that Mishra and Urza do throughout the stories of Magic. But Optimus Prime is also my favorite character from Transformers. As a child, I'd come home from school at lunchtime and the local TV station would play Transformers Generation 1 on at lunchtime. So I would watch Optimus Prime and Megatron have their weekly battle. So Optimus Prime says, for 3, a blue, a red, and a white, you have a 4/8 legendary artifact creature robot. It also has more than meets the eye, which means you can pay 2, a blue, a red, and a white as an alternate casting cost, and it comes in on the other side. So on this side of the robot, we get at the beginning of each end step, bolster 1. Each end step, bolster 1. That's the key to this one. And when Optimus Prime dies, return it to the battlefield converted under its owner's control. And if it converts into Optimus Prime Autobot Leader, where it's a truck, and now it's a 6/8 as living metal. So on my turn, Optimus Prime can attack, but otherwise it's not a creature, right? So, it has Trample, and whenever you attack, bolster 2. The chosen creature gains Trample until end of turn. When that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, convert it to Optimus Prime. So I have to say, I really immediately took to this one because I really liked the fact that it was a difficult commander to remove, on top of it being my favorite character from the TV show as a child. So I had to build Optimus Prime. Now, I've subsequently built a whole bunch of other Transformers as commanders, but this one was the first one I built, and I built it for good cause. So let's talk about Optimus. So this is an artifact deck, and it's an artifact +1/+1 counter deck. So you're looking to put +1/+1 counters or some sort of value associated with that. Now, problem with Optimus Prime being a 6-mana commander. He's reasonably expensive and difficult to get into play. So let's talk about first how we're going to get him into play. We've got a whole bunch of ramp cards here. So we got things like the good old Sol Ring. Can't go wrong with that one. We have an Arcane Signet. Can't go wrong with that. We have an Azorius Signet. We have an Izzet Signet. We have a Midnight Clock. All right. And we have a Mana Vault. This is your first indication. This is not a budget deck tonight. You're absolutely right. And I'll talk about why it's not a budget deck in a little bit later. But we have a Mana Vault. Then the other 3 cards here in my ramp package are cards that help reduce the cost of artifacts. So we've got Enthusiastic Mechanaut, helps make artifacts cost 1 less. Foundry Inspector, artifact spells cost 1 less. And then Ethereum Sculptor, artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. So between all these cards here, you have enough ways to help reduce the cost of your Optimus Prime to help him get into play. Now, let's talk about some of the payoffs with this particular commander. So we have a lot of ways of putting counters on our stuff. So a lot of them are cards that have modular on them. So Zabaz, the Glimmer Wasp, for instance, has modular 1. So this 1 mana 0/0 legendary artifact creature insect has modular 1, meaning when it comes into play, it has a +1/+1 counter on it. So the text on this one says, if a modular triggered ability would put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put +1 are put on it instead. So it allows you to, if you're going to put, if the modular ability triggers, so Zabaz dies, and you would put that +1/+1 counter, you can put it on one of your other creatures, which makes it particularly good. Now, Zabaz says that if it triggers again, you go and put a whole bunch of extra counters on whatever you're putting it on. So, good times. It's a fun card. Not well known, so it's a little bit tricky. It also has 2 other abilities. Red, destroy target artifact you control, or which presumably you trigger to get the modular ability. And then white, the Blaz, the Glimmer Wasp, gains flying until end of turn. So if you can make Zabaz humongous, you can then give it flying and make it hard to stop. So that's one of the examples of a modular card. There's a few others in here. Arcbound Whelp has modular 2. Arcbound Shikari has modular 2. Then we have Arcbound Slasher has modular 4. And then we've got Arcbound Tracker with modular 2 again. And Arcbound Javelineer, which all has modular 1. So these 5 cards have got the modular ability attached to them. And they, along with Zabaz, make a pretty interesting sort of feature. In addition to whatever counters that they might pick up from Optimus Prime. Then we have things like Lae'zel. Lae'zel, Vlaakith's champion, says if you would put one or more counters on a creature or a planeswalker you control or on yourself, put that many put +1 each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So it would put an extra counter on your things. We have Felidar Retreat with a mode where you can put a +1 counter on things. You can make a land drop. We've got Steel Overseer, put a +1 counter on each artifact creature you control. Seems handy in a deck full of artifacts. We have Karn's Bastion, which is a land, but it also has Proliferate, which means all those counters get to go up one more time. And then we have Abzan Falconer that says it can put a counter on itself, but each creature you control with a +1 counter on it has flying. There's a few other abilities that this are granted by +1 counters that are in here that are worth reflecting on. So Herald of the Secret Stream is one of the other ones. Creatures you control with a +1 counter on them can't be blocked. So that's a particularly nasty way of making sure that your creatures get through. The other one is Metropolis Angel. And says, so it is a 2, a white, and a red for a 3/1 with flying, and whenever you attack with one or more creatures with counters on them, draw a card. So if you attack with creatures that have counters on them, you then proceed to get value out of it. All right, so beyond that, in my deck, there's a bunch of other ways to recur these modular creatures to try and get good effect of them. So there's things like Scrap Welder, which is from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, 2 and a red for a 3/3. Goblin Artificer, sacrifice an artifact with a mana value X. Return target artifact card with mana value less than X from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains haste until end of turn. So you can return one of those modular creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield with your Scrap Welder. You also have a Goblin Engineer. When a Goblin Engineer enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. And then 1 in a red, sacrifice an artifact, probably a modular creature, return target artifact card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Lots of interesting targets to go and hit with that one. Well, we also have Osgir the Reconstructor. So this is 2 white red for a 4/4 with Vigilance, legendary creature Giant Artificer. 1, sacrifice an artifact, target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So probably a modular creature to put more counters on things. And then X in a tap, exile an artifact card with mana value X or less from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of the exiled card. Activate only as a sorcery. All right. We have Campus Renovation, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then you exile some cards, you can play them. So you get things back. We have Emery, which gets things back. So tap Emery to choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. So if you sacrifice a modular card, you can get it back with Emery. We also have Tameshi. So Tameshi says X and white, return a land you control to its owner's hand. Return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So you can use that to get your things back. We, of course, have things like Padim, Consul of Innovation, which is 4 and a white for a 4 and a blue for a 1/4. Artifacts you control hexproof, making it hard for your opponents to target your things and get them dead. We have Shimmermere, so your artifacts now have flash. Yes, please. And Gold Forged Thopterix, a white and a blue for a 1/3 with flying and lifelink. Each legendary permanent you control has Ward 2. Considering you have a bunch of, you have Optimus Prime and a bunch of other robots that all have proper names, it's pretty handy. Let's talk about the other Autobots in this list. So we've got Jetfire, Ingenious Scientist. This one I like mostly for the other side of it because you can adapt it for blue, 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 and then flip it over and put 3 counters on it. And if it picks up any other additional counters too, but then when you flip it back over, remove 1 or more +1/+1 counters from among artifacts you control, like +1/+1 encounters that you've accrued on things. Target player adds that much colorless mana. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. So it's a way of ramping on a creature, or if you just want a big old beater, it's a big old flying thing that's going to smash people. Prowl, Stoic Strategist, has a whenever Prowl attacks, exile to one other target tapped creature or vehicle. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. Whenever a player plays a card exiled with Prowl, you can draw a card and convert Prowl. And then it flips over into Prowl Pursuit Vehicle. Whenever another creature or vehicle enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Prowl. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, convert Prowl. So the neat thing with this one is you can use it as an exile effect on your opponent's things. Let's say you want to make them reset something big that's got a bunch of counters or enchantments or whatever on it. But you could also do it if something you have needs to be reset. So let's imagine you need to reset one of your creatures with modular or something that's been frozen or locked down or whatever. You could go and exile it and get it back. Pretty handy card. Then we have RC, Sharpshooter, and really you're playing her for this friend's ability. So she's 1 white-red for a 2/2 with first strike, and then 1, remove 1 or more +1/+1 counters from RC. It deals that much damage to target creature, and then you can convert RC. So if you put a bunch of counters on RC, RC can then be used to zap things out of the way. And last one but not least is Ratchet, Field Medic, and this one allows you, whenever you gain life, you may convert Ratchet. When you do, return target artifact card with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life you gain this turn from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So that's been getting things back. All right. Next, we've got some things like, some things that are going to make our things more powerful. So creatures you control with a +1/+1 counter become 4/4 Flying Angels. Thank you, Sigarda's Summons. And this is Tempered Steel. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2, making your things really hard to deal with. All right, then we have some utility things over here. We've got some things like, the Ashnod's Altar, or the Opposition because you don't want to get attacked, or the Unwinding Clock that once you've tapped those things down, you can untap them with a Winding Clock. Maybe you have an Altar Dementia because you need to make sure that if there is going to be something that dies, like, you want that modular trigger, you can get it with Altar Dementia. And then Crawl Space, make sure that your opponents can't attack you with more than 2 creatures each combat. So those are all handy things. The last 2 things we have here are some things that are going to get us the job of keeping our hand full so we can keep up the assault. So, Fact or Fiction, Shorikai, Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, Thoughtcast, Verity Circle, Research Thief, Benthic Biomancer, Thought Monitor, Dig Through Time. All these spells have in common is they're going to get me cards, put them back in my hand through different methods. Fact or Fiction is a classic. Shorikai is well known because it's a powerful commander in its own right. You can draw 2 and then discard a card and create a 1/1 pilot. So, and then you can crew it for a whole lot, but you're really looking for it to loot. All right, Tezzeret says +1, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact. Since I've got lots of ways to recur my artifacts, I'm pretty okay with it. And it might not just be artifact creatures. I have artifact lands. I've got artifacts of all sorts. So you're going to draw some cards with that. Thoughtcast is 4 and a blue for a card that has affinity for artifacts, meaning it costs 1 cheaper for each artifact I control, and then draw 2 cards. All right, Verity Circle is one that I really, really like. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. Oh, then you can spend 4 and a blue, tap target creature without flying. I love this card because there's so many creatures in Commander that tap for some sort of ability, and now you're going to reap the benefits of it. And if you want to force them into a tap situation, you can do it. Dig Through Time, pretty well-known spell. You can delve it away and look at the top 7, and then put 2 of them into your hand and the rest of the bottom. We've got a Thought Monitor, which is a 2/2 for 7 mana, but it also has affinity for artifacts. And when it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. Benthic Biomancer, so it's a 1 mana 1/1 with adapt for 1 and a blue, and has adapt 1. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 encounters are put on Benthic Biomancer, draw a card, then discard a card. So the idea here is that Optimus Prime is going to bolster each turn, meaning you're probably going to stick a couple of counters on this thing, draw a few cards. And then Research Thief is 4 and a blue for a 3/3 flying creature with flash. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you can draw a card, which is similar to, if anyone's playing Standard right now, Enduring Curiosity. Very powerful effect. Last but not least, we have our interaction, which is going to be super good to help keep our things alive. So Unbreakable Formation keeps our things alive. We have Rootborn Defenses that keeps things alive. We'll have a Boros Charm that keeps things alive. And Mother of Runes gives something protection so that you don't end up getting blown out by your opponent targeting Optimus Prime or something else. Then the interaction, we've got a couple of board wipes. We have an Hour of Revelation. We have a Blasphemous Act. We have a Time Wipe. Those three are probably the most obvious sources of board control that this deck has. Not to say that something else couldn't do it. Oh, I forgot one. There's Cyclonic Rift. So 4 different board control targets that are going to make sure that your board stays clear. You can keep your things and get ahead. Then some targeted interaction. We have Stubborn Denial, which is a counterspell. We have Counterspell itself as another counterspell. We have an Offer You Can't Refuse, which is always handy to have. March of Swirling Mist makes things phase out, so you can phase out their things assertively, or you can phase out your things to avoid a board wipe. Snap is a bounce effect, but you get to untap some lands. String of Disappearances is my kind of stand-in for a Chain of Vapor. It's quite a bit cheaper, but it also only targets creatures. It's still handy, but has its limits. And then we have Path to Exile and Source Plowshares. This isn't a budget deck by any stretch of the imagination. There's a number of the cards in this deck end up being quite pricey, particularly in the mana base, because there are shock lands and fetch lands and all the rest of it. But I will be very honest with you. I saw this card, Optimus Prime, and decided that I needed to do this right and make this one of my favorite commanders really be something I really enjoy playing. And so I really do not wish to stumble on my mana, so I made a point of spending what I wanted on it to get what I needed. How does this deck play? It's a little bit of a snowball. If you can get Optimus Prime down early before your opponents are ready for it, you're probably going to do okay. If you get stuck on your mana and you can't get your things down, your opponents can keep your board clear, then you probably have a hard time snowballing. But if you can, it's a ton of fun and something that I really enjoy playing when I sit down to play my favorite Commander game and my favorite with my favorite character from my favorite TV show as a kid. All right, deck list is in the show notes down below. You can go check it out for yourself on Moxfield, along with all of our other decks we've brewed on the show. If you want to find out more from us, you can check us out every week on your favorite podcast apps. Once again, that's the Epic Experiment Podcast. But yeah, that's Optimus Prime, Hero. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks very much, everybody. See you soon. Bye.